Amy Lynn Bradley, still missing. An unsolved cruise ship disappearance, new leads, and the questions that won't let go. This video contains discussions of disappearance and psychological trauma. Viewer discretion is advised. What if I told you a woman vanished from a cruise ship and no body was ever found? No confirmed fall, no verified death. And for nearly 3 decades, people around the world have claimed they saw her alive. In ports, in brothels, in photographs that still exist. Her name is Amy Lynn Bradley. And the mystery of what happened to her didn't end in 1998. It may be more alive now than ever. True crime stories often begin with violence. This one begins with absence. No screams, no struggle witnessed. Just a young woman who went to sleep on a cruise ship balcony and was never seen again. This is an unsolved disappearance. A case that lives at the intersection of true crime, missing persons, cruise ship mysteries, and alleged human trafficking. And today, we're revisiting it through new documentaries, newly amplified leads, and uncomfortable questions about systems that may have failed her. But before we talk about theories, before we examine evidence, we need to talk about who Amy was. Amy Lynn Bradley wasn't a mystery. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend whose laugh carried. Born in 1974, Amy grew up in Virginia. She loved sports, especially basketball. She was athletic, strong, and deeply close to her younger brother, Brad. People who knew her described someone independent but warm, confident but not reckless, the kind of person who checked on others before herself. In March of 1998, Amy and her family boarded the Royal Caribbean cruise ship Rhapsody of the Seas. It was supposed to be a celebration, a vacation, a memory. Instead, it became a permanent fracture in their lives. When we talk about disappearances like this, it's important to resist flattening the victim into a symbol. Amy was the girl who vanished. She was a person with routines, boundaries, and relationships, and those details matter when assessing likelihoods. March 23, 1998. The ship is sailing between Aruba and Curaçao. That night, Amy and her brother go dancing at the ship's nightclub. They return to their cabin in the early morning hours. According to family testimony, Amy sits on the balcony chair. She tells Brad she just wants some air. This is important. There is no reported argument, no distress. Brad falls asleep. At approximately 5:30 a.m., Amy's father, Ron Bradley, wakes briefly and sees her legs through the balcony door. She's still there. At 6:00 a.m., she's gone. Her cigarettes are still in the cabin. Her shoes, her passport, her money. According to cruise ship logs, the ship docks later that morning. Amy never disembarks. Royal Caribbean's initial position was simple. Amy fell overboard. But here the problem. No body was ever recovered. No confirmed splash. No eyewitness. And cruise ships are not neutral spaces. They are floating jurisdictions, governed by complex maritime laws. In 1998, oversight was limited, reporting standards inconsistent, and accountability often internal. Known fact: the FBI later became involved. The ship was searched after docking. No physical evidence conclusively proves a fall. Perceived possibilities: whether someone saw something and didn't report it, whether surveillance footage was incomplete or unavailable. We don't know everything investigators know, and we should be honest about what remains sealed. But the lack of clarity is itself part of this story. We're digging into the darkest corners of true crime history, cases you've never heard of, told the way they deserve to be told. If this story fascinates you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Comment your thoughts on the case and share with true crime fans who need to know this story. Over the years, something unsettling happened. People started reporting sightings. A U.S. Navy officer claimed he encountered a woman in a Caribbean brothel who said her name was Amy Bradley, and that she was being held against her will. Years later, a photograph surfaced. A woman resembling Amy posted on an adult website. We need to be careful here. And somewhere on the upper deck of the Rhapsody of the Seas, something may have happened that no one has ever been able to fully explain. According to 3 witnesses between 5:30 and 5:45 a.m., Amy was seen on the upper deck with Alister Douglas, the bass player for the ship's band. They claimed the two arrived together in an elevator. They claimed Douglas handed Amy a drink containing a dark-colored liquid. And they claimed that just after 6:00 a.m., Douglas was seen leaving the deck alone. Amy was never seen again. When Amy's family realized she was missing, they did what any family would do. They ran to the ship's crew. They begged them to stop passengers from disembarking. They asked for an immediate announcement. They were told it was too early. Instead, the first announcement didn't go out until 7:50 a.m., after most of the ship's 2,000 passengers had already left. And even then, the announcement didn't say Amy was missing. It simply said, "Will Amy Bradley please come to the purser's desk?" Between 12:15 and 1:00 p.m., the crew searched the ship. Amy wasn't there. Investigators would later say the delay may have cost them their best chance to find her. Not long after Amy disappeared, but before any public announcement, her brother Brad was approached by Alister Douglas. Douglas said something that stopped Brad cold. "Hey man, I'm sorry to hear about your sister." Brad immediately thought the timing was off. How did Douglas know? The FBI later interviewed Douglas and administered a polygraph test. Royal Caribbean said he passed. Amy's father, Ron Bradley, remembered watching Douglas walk out of the interview smiling, giving thumbs up to his bandmates. Ron was convinced Douglas knew more than he admitted. Douglas denied any involvement. The Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard launched a 4-day search, deploying helicopters, radar aircraft, and patrol boats. Royal Caribbean chartered an additional vessel. No trace of Amy was found. Authorities initially considered 3 possibilities. She fell overboard, she died by suicide, or she met with foul play. But investigators later stated there was no evidence that Amy, a trained lifeguard, fell, jumped, or was pushed. And still, no body was ever recovered. About a month later, Amy's family traveled to Curaçao. There, a cab driver approached them. He claimed that on the day Amy disappeared, he saw a woman matching her description running through a parking lot, desperately looking for a phone. He remembered her green eyes, which were listed on the missing poster. Authorities never corroborated his account. Then came August 1998. 2 Canadian divers reported seeing a woman they believed was Amy at Playa Porto Marie. They said she was with 2 aggressive men, one resembling Alister Douglas. When one of the divers spoke English, the woman reportedly turned toward him, then was quickly pulled away. The diver later said, "I am haunted by that encounter. I know it was her." The FBI investigated. They could not confirm the sighting. In January 1999, a U.S. Navy petty officer named William Hefner said a woman approached him in a Curaçao brothel. She told him her name was Amy Bradley. She begged for help. She said she had disembarked a cruise ship for drugs and was now being held against her will. Hefner didn't report it at the time, fearing consequences for his career. Years later, he came forward. The FBI investigated, but the brothel had burned down and no physical evidence remained. In 1999, Amy's parents received an email from a man named Frank Jones, claiming to be a former Special Forces soldier. He said he knew where Amy was. He described her tattoos accurately. He even sang her mother's lullaby. He asked for money to fund a rescue. Desperate for hope, the Bradleys sent over $210,000. There was no rescue. Jones had fabricated the entire story. He was later convicted of mail fraud and sentenced to 5 years in prison. In 2003, witnesses claimed they saw Amy in San Francisco, walking with 2 men who allegedly dragged her away after realizing they were recognized. In 2005, a woman claimed she encountered Amy in a Barbados restroom, accompanied by men discussing an illegal deal. She said the woman whispered her name was Amy. Sketches were made. Nothing was confirmed. That same year, photos surfaced online of a distressed sex worker named Jas, who resembled Amy. The FBI could not authenticate the images. In 2010, a human jawbone washed ashore in Aruba. It was not Natalie Holloway. It was never DNA tested against Amy. In March 2010, 12 years after she vanished, Amy Lynn Bradley was declared legally dead. Authorities investigated every angle. Accident, suicide, murder, trafficking. None could be conclusively proven. An FBI agent later said, "We've pursued every angle, and we basically have not gotten anywhere." And that's where this case still stands. A woman vanished. A family never stopped searching. And nearly 3 decades later, no one can say with certainty what happened to Amy Lynn Bradley. Here's an investigative analysis by True Crime Mysteries on what most likely happened to Amy Lynn Bradley. Established facts on the Amy Lynn Bradley case are: 23-year-old Amy Bradley vanished from Royal Caribbean's Rhapsody of the Seas on March 24, 1998, during a family cruise. She was last seen on her cabin balcony in the early morning, before the ship reached Curaçao. When her father checked again within about 30 minutes, she was gone. Her cigarettes and lighter were missing from the balcony, but her shoes and other items remained behind. Despite an extensive search by the Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard, FBI involvement, and later publicized leads, no physical evidence of Amy has ever been found, no body, no confirmed identifiable trace. First, a critical re-examination of timeline and environment reveals that there has been confusion in public commentary about whether Amy disappeared while the ship was still offshore or already in port docked. Independent research and witness timelines indicate Ron Bradley last saw her on the balcony between 5:15 and 5:30 a.m. as the ship was approaching Curaçao or entering the canal not fully docked. Discussion among informed researchers suggests the ship may have completed docking maneuvers by around 6:00 a.m., but was still in the process of final positioning. This means she likely disappeared during the final approach to port, a transitional phase where the ship is slowing, maneuvering, and not yet fully secured, a highly uncertain zone for passenger safety and control. The initial response by the ship's crew was slow. The first general announcement occurred at 7:50 a.m., after most passengers had disembarked. Critical early search opportunities and lockdown procedures did not happen. This procedural failure is consistently noted by maritime law analysts as a major investigative and safety flaw, rather than only a human error. Second, an evaluation of witness testimony exposes upper deck sightings with Alister Douglas. Multiple passengers reported seeing Amy on the upper deck between 5:35–45 a.m. in the company of Alister, Yellow Douglas, a musician on board. Points to consider. The sightings were reported after her disappearance was already known. People reconstruct a memory subconsciously to fit public knowledge. Douglas was questioned and given a polygraph, which was reported by Royal Caribbean as past or inconclusive. There is no physical evidence linking Douglas to Amy's disappearance. No arrest, no charges, no forensic tie. The documentary's framing of this encounter generated controversy, including criticism that it might inappropriately amplify suspicion without evidentiary basis. Here's my take. Eyewitness testimony, especially recalled after the fact and under media attention, is one of the most unreliable forms of evidence in missing person cases. Confidence does not equate to accuracy. This does not mean witnesses are intentionally deceptive. Memory reconstruction under stress and media exposure is well documented in cognitive psychology. Third, the sightings pattern and credibility is muddled in mystery. Several alleged sightings followed the disappearance. Cab driver claim in Curaçao shortly after the incident. 2 Canadian divers claiming to see a woman matching her description. U.S. Navy officer claim of meeting a woman claiming to be Amy in a brothel months later. Anonymous photos of a woman dubbed Jas sent to the family and shown on media. However, none were independently verified by law enforcement. The FBI investigated and could not substantiate any of the leads based on evidence. Photographs lacked metadata, chain of custody, and forensic backing, making them unsuitable as factual source material. Listen, in missing person case analyses, unverified sightings often arise in high-profile cases, particularly where no closure is provided. They create noise that complicates investigations and can detract from core evidence. According to law enforcement records, none of these sightings have been conclusively verified, but they also were never fully disproven. Amy's family believes still that she may have been trafficked. A human trafficking specialist notes that cruise ships can be vulnerable points in trafficking networks, not because it's common, but because when it happens, it's incredibly hard to trace, especially in the late 90s. This theory raises deeply uncomfortable questions. Could someone have taken her without leaving obvious signs? Could silence, delay, or jurisdictional confusion have mattered? In 2025, a new documentary series, Amy Bradley is Missing, brought the case back into public consciousness. It didn't solve the mystery, but it did something powerful. It recentered Amy's humanity. It amplified overlooked details, and it reopened conversations about institutional accountability. New viewers began asking old questions and submitting new tips. Here's the truth that makes this case endure. There is no satisfying ending. If Amy fell, then a family lost a daughter without answers. If she was taken, then something far darker happened in plain sight. Both possibilities indict systems larger than any one person. And maybe the hardest part is this: Amy is not frozen in time as a victim. She is a person whose story is still unfolding in uncertainty. Now let's consider alternative theories. Accidental fall or environmental loss theory. Documentary and expert commentary place significant weight on the plausibility that Amy accidentally fell overboard. Cruise balconies in 1998 had lighter railings and no mandated safety features compared to today. She had last been seen relaxing outside, possibly fatigued after late social activity. Other cruise ship disappearance case studies show that overboard falls, particularly during docking pre-dawn transitions, often leave no bodies due to currents and no direct witnesses. This hypothesis does not require speculation of foul play or human agency, but aligns with situational risk. Suicide or self-harm theory. There is no documented history or evidence to support this theory in Amy's case. The FBI and investigators have not found signs consistent with suicide, and her known life plans and relationships do not fit typical risk profiles. Abduction or foul play theory. The idea that she was kidnapped by crew, passengers, organized traffickers, or pirates lacks corroborated evidence, physical trace, credible forensic tie. Even organized trafficking networks do not plausibly operate by unobserved abduction from an active cruise ship without leaving a witness, forensic trace, or downstream record. This theory is considered extremely low probability based on logistics and operational behavior patterns. It's also important to consider the maritime systemic context. Cruise ships in the late 1990s were not required to have modern safety protocols now mandated by laws like the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, CVSSA, passed in 2010. At the time, there was no obligation to lock down or prevent disembarkation for a missing person. There were no standardized CCTV preservation protocols. The crew operated under discretion, not regulation. When analyzed critically, you'd also discover that this gap is not evidence of a cover-up. It reflects systemic regulatory insufficiency, which hampered early pursuit and security, not deliberate foul play. After critically analyzing all credible material, documented facts, official statements, credible reporting, forensic context, and psychological reliability assessments, the most defensible conclusion is Amy Lynn Bradley most likely suffered an unintentional overboard fall during the early morning hours as the ship approached its destination, or was maneuvering toward docking. Key supporting premises. 1. No physical evidence of abduction or foul play has ever been validated. 2. No body, no sign of struggle, no genetic trace separate from absence. 3. The last verified location was the balcony, a place from which accidental slips are statistically plausible in maritime contexts. 4. Multiple credible public sources and specialists affirm the weakness of alternative theories absent evidence. 5. Sightings and later claims do not withstand independent verification. I'll tell you why the unresolved nature persists. No body recovered means no closure by forensic standard. Regulatory gaps in 1998 enabled evidence loss and delayed search responses. Human cognitive bias and grief lead to acceptance of unverified sightings. This position is not dismissive of family pain, but reflects the highest empirical probability based on available evidence and professional standards. After exhaustive analysis of victim behavior, physical environment, maritime logistics, eyewitness reliability, and investigative precedent, I conclude with high professional confidence that Amy Lynn Bradley accidentally went overboard from the balcony of her family's cabin in the early morning hours of March 24, 1998, and perished at sea. This conclusion is not based on convenience, industry narrative, or dismissal of the family's pain. It is based on what the evidence supports, what human behavior predicts, and what alternative theories fail to plausibly sustain under scrutiny. What made this case endure is not mystery, but institutional failure and the absence of physical recovery, which allowed emotionally compelling but investigatively weak theories to flourish. Who Amy was matters. Amy Bradley was physically fit, athletic, confident around people, social but not impulsive, deeply bonded to her family, not psychologically distressed, not running from her life. This profile immediately eliminates suicide and voluntary disappearance as viable explanations. However, it also tells us something critical. Amy was comfortable with physical space, height, movement, and balance, which paradoxically increases risk in unguarded moments, especially when fatigue and alcohol are present. Victimology does not suggest intent. It suggests vulnerability in a specific environmental context. Another moment that matters is the critical window. The balcony between 5:36:00 a.m. This is the fulcrum of the case. At approximately 5:30 a.m., Amy is confirmed alive, seated or reclining on the balcony. Again, key environmental facts. Ship is moving at speed. Ocean swell present. Dawn light emerging, disorienting visual conditions. Balcony railings in 1998 were below modern safety standards. Furniture placement encouraged leaning or reclining near railings. More importantly, key behavioral facts. Amy had been drinking earlier, not incapacitated but impaired. She was tired. She chose solitude. She was smoking, routine behavior, but increases leaning posture. This combination, fatigue plus alcohol, plus elevation plus motion, is one of the most well-documented risk clusters for accidental falls at sea. It is imperative to examine the fall, why it left no trace. Critics of the accidental fall theory ask, why didn't anyone hear it? Why was there no splash? Why was no body found? These questions misunderstand maritime physics and acoustics. Ocean noise masks impact. A human body does not create a dramatic splash at cruise speed. Doors were closed, most passengers asleep. The failure of body recovery was another grave, unfortunate reality. Currents between Aruba and Curaçao are fast and dispersive. Recovery rates for overboard victims are statistically low. Absence of a body is tragic, but not anomalous. It is important to note that personal items left behind is not evidence against a fall. It is evidence of non-intentional movement. People do not plan accidents. Now, I'll tell you why abduction and trafficking fail as investigative theories. This is where professional analysis must override emotional resonance. The operational reality is that abducting an adult woman from a moving cruise ship would require multiple coordinated offenders, perfect timing, silence, zero witnesses, no forensic trace, successful off-ship transfer, no corroborating port evidence. This is operationally implausible. In cases involving trafficking, the reality is that human trafficking does not operate by abducting middle-class American women from cruise ships. It operates through grooming, economic coercion, migration vulnerability. Amy fits none of these profiles. The sightings. Every alleged sighting suffers from delayed reporting, suggestibility, media contamination, no independent verification. Eyewitness psychology is clear. Confidence grows as accuracy decays. From an objective standpoint, I'll tell you why the JAS photographs is misleading. The photographs are emotionally powerful and investigatively weak. Key facts: no metadata, no origin, no chain of custody, no corroboration. Facial similarity is not identification. In cold cases, ambiguous images often become Rorschach tests for grief, not evidence. The FBI did not authenticate them because they could not. Here is where responsibility truly lies. What went wrong? Delay in recognizing an overboard incident. No immediate ship reversal. No instant maritime alert. Cruise industry self-investigation. Poor interjurisdictional coordination. Had the response been immediate, outcome might have differed. This failure created the vacuum where speculation grew. Sadly, the psychology of unresolved loss is haunting and inexhaustibly traumatizing. Families do not cling to alternative theories because they are irrational. They do so because no body equals no mourning, no certainty equals no closure, and random accidents feel morally unacceptable. The human mind seeks agency, villains, narratives. Accidents offer none. After reconstructing behavior, environment, logistics, and evidence, the only conclusion that survives rigorous scrutiny is this: Amy Lynn Bradley accidentally fell overboard from her cabin balcony in the early morning hours of March 24, 1998, and died shortly thereafter. This conclusion respects evidence, aligns with behavioral science, explains all known facts, requires no conspiracies, does not depend on unreliable testimony. It is not emotionally satisfying, but it is professionally sound. Based on what has been unraveled, Amy Bradley did not disappear because someone took her. She disappeared because systems failed to protect her and failed to respond in time. Her story is not a mystery of evil. It is a tragedy of environment, chance, and institutional delay. And that may be the hardest truth of all. If this story disturbed you, fascinated you, or made you question everything you thought you knew about human nature, you need to subscribe to this channel. We're digging into the darkest, most buried true crime cases in history, stories the textbooks won't tell you, crimes that cities tried to erase, and victims who deserve to be remembered. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, because next week, we're uncovering another case that haunts us all. If you're enjoying this deep dive, hit that like button. It genuinely helps us bring you more of these forgotten cases. All right, back to the horror. At the end of every investigation, there is a moment when the noise falls away. The theories, the sightings, the photographs that look like answers but aren't. What remains is not certainty. It is weight. Amy Lynn Bradley did not vanish because someone erased her. She vanished because the sea is indifferent, and because the systems meant to protect people at sea were not built to respond fast enough. There is evidence of fatigue, of motion, of height, of a moment that required no intent, only imbalance. And when that moment happened, there was no alarm, no immediate turn of the ship, no chance to recover what the ocean took. The mystery that followed was not born from what happened to Amy, but from what didn't happen afterward. A delayed search, a fragmented investigation, a family left to fill silence with hope, because hope is kinder than randomness. We tell ourselves stories about traffickers and conspiracies because they give shape to loss, because an accident feels unfair, because it offers no one to blame, only systems to question. Amy's story is not unresolved because the truth is unknowable. It is unresolved because the truth arrived without witnesses and without a body to bring her home. But resolution does not always come from discovery. Sometimes it comes from honesty, from accepting that a young woman lived fully, loved deeply, and died suddenly. Not because she was careless, not because she was reckless, but because chance and environment crossed paths at the wrong moment. Remember her not as a mystery, not as a rumor, not as a photograph on a screen. Remember her as a daughter, a sister, a presence that mattered. And remember this: the real lesson of Amy Lynn Bradley's story is not about fear. It is about accountability. Because the ocean didn't fail her, the response did. The rationale behind this conclusion is based on logical premise. The location and timing matters. Was the ship docking? Here are key points to note. Amy was last seen between roughly 5:30 a.m. on March 24, 1998, asleep on the balcony of her cabin. When her father checked again near 6 a.m., she was gone, with only her cigarettes and lighter taken. Passengers were already being allowed off the ship as the vessel prepared to dock in Curaçao. Some independent researchers claim the ship was already alongside or completing docking procedures at the moment of disappearance, though the documentary and official records state the exact timing is ambiguous. Obviously, the family's account and ship logs show her last confirmed location on the balcony shortly before passengers disembarked. Whether the ship was technically docking or still finalizing maneuvers does not materially change the core challenge. No physical evidence of her leaving the vessel was found, and no corroborated CCTV, crew testimony, or verified witness account places her off the ship alive. Evidence indicates that there were no signs of struggle or disturbance were noted in the family cabin or on the balcony area. Witnesses note a generally undisturbed environment, with sandals and personal items left behind. The precise moment of disappearance fits the narrow window where she was last seen alone on the balcony before docking, and that investigators have not found physical evidence supporting alternative scenarios. Given the absence of credible contradictory evidence, the most forensically supportable explanation remains accidental overboard fall during the narrow window she was alone on the balcony. Let me digress a bit. One would have argued about the shipping company's liability for duty of care. However, in maritime law context, cruise ships are treated as common carriers under maritime law, which generally requires them to exercise a heightened duty of care to passengers. Their key duties include maintaining safe conditions aboard ship, responding promptly to emergencies, training staff to recognize and act on missing passenger protocols, preserving potential evidence after serious incidents, coordinating with authorities appropriately. However, jurisdiction at sea is extremely complex. The vessel was flagged abroad. The incident occurred near, but not necessarily in territorial waters, and the FBI operates under specific authority only when federal laws are implicated. The Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, CVSSA, requiring advanced reporting and CCTV, was not in effect in 1998. It was enacted in 2010 in response in part to cases like Amy's. The Bradleys did sue Royal Caribbean for negligence and wrongful death in 1999, but the lawsuit was dismissed on procedural grounds, not on a finding that the company fulfilled all duties. The legal interpretation is important. While a cruise line does owe a duty of care, proving breach of duty and causation in civil court requires demonstrating that the company's conduct more likely than not caused the victims harm. Here, the company did not immediately secure the ship, yes. A search was delayed, yes. But did these causal delays directly result in her disappearance? Harder to prove without knowing if she was already overboard before actions could have helped. Therefore, the Royal Caribbean arguably failed in certain procedural best practices: communication, immediate search, locking down the ship. But without a clear causal link between specific failures and her death, civil liability remains unresolved and legally difficult to establish, even if morally compelling. So the company likely breached some expected standards of care, but legal culpability is not proven beyond procedural criticisms. Overall confidence, -70% for accidental overboard explanation. This acknowledges uncertainty due to no recovered body and investigative limitations, but reflects the weight of credible evidence. It is entirely reasonable and humane for family members to hold out hope and seek justice. Emotional duty of care is separate from empirical proof. Their persistence has kept the case visible and, importantly, has contributed to industry reforms such as the CVSSA. It is extremely difficult for members of her immediate family to come to terms with this unfortunate outcome. It hurts badly, and getting closure is ultimate. For Amy Bradley's family, time did not heal this wound. It only stretched it, day by day, into something they learned to carry rather than escape. 27 years later, they live in the space between hope and grief, where love refuses to accept what evidence suggests, and silence never feels like an answer. Even as the possibility of finding Amy alive grows slimmer, a parent's instinct does not follow probability. It follows devotion, memory, and the unbearable need to know. They have searched not because they believe the world owes them a miracle, but because giving up would feel like losing her all over again. In that persistence is something every American family recognizes: the belief that love does not end when answers disappear. And if closure ever comes, it may not arrive as certainty, but as the quiet knowledge that Amy was deeply loved, fiercely sought, and never, ever forgot. Some answers don't bring comfort, but they can bring truth. And truth, handled with care, is the closest thing to justice this case may ever know. So now we turn to you. What detail doesn't sit right? What assumption deserves re-examination? This isn't about armchair detectives chasing thrills. It's about collective memory and refusing to let absence become erasure. New leads emerged in 2025. Very significant leads and suspicious IP addresses tracked to Barbados were being weighed. Please, anyone with information should contact their local FBI office or the nearest American embassy or consulate. Some mysteries fade. Others demand witnesses. Amy Lynn Bradley's story is one of them. Stay curious. Stay skeptical. I'm working on a follow-up video exploring other buried, cold cases and serial killer cases. Any requests? Drop them below. I'll see you in the next investigation.